Yeah, I do. We do try to learn.
I think we're going to start if you're ready after that.
Oh, yeah.
I think we're going to start. This is so exciting. Oh my God, there are more people here, I think, for this particular author than there have been for anybody else this year anyway. So welcome to you all. Willy Vlautin is here as part of our Northwest Author Series. And it's my pleasure to introduce him. And I also want to welcome all of you and thank the Waves for hosting the event. And please silence your cell phones. So I'm going to introduce Willy to you now. I think there are a lot of fans of Willy in the room. I'm getting that sense. Willy has written 6 novels and has received accolades internationally and has been awarded 3 Oregon Book Awards and the Nevada Silver Pen Award. His novels have been translated into 11 languages. Of Willy's 6 novels, 2 have been made into motion pictures, into films. He was inducted into the Nevada Writers Hall of Fame and the Oregon Music Hall of Fame. Yes, you heard me right. I said the Oregon Music Hall of Fame. Willy is, in addition to being a writer, an accomplished and talented musician, founding 2 bands, Richard Fontaine and the Delines, and still performing with the Delines.
Yep.
And hopefully all this post-pandemic on tour sometime.
Yeah, we're
soon.
okay.
Barely. We are in for a treat today, as Willy will read from his most recent novel and discuss his novel, The Night Always Comes, and sing and play some songs. I've read 4 of Willy's novels, and I look forward to reading the 2 I haven't read. Much has been written and said about Willy's books. For me, Willy's work is deeply personal, writing about working people living on the margins of life who seem at times not to make very good choices. Willy's characters aren't dealt a great hand. A choice may be based on something not being as bad as something else. Each of Willy's characters has a moral compass and is trying to do right for themselves, for their family. And it's a daily struggle doing that, but struggle they do, in fact, heroically. Willy also does something extra special, and that is he brings weight and pathos to supporting characters, such as Lynette's mother in The Night Always Comes. Those who stand in the way of our protagonist achieving dreams or even just surviving frustrate and anger us. Willy reminds us that supporting characters have stories too. That's quite a feat. This afternoon, you're going to hear more about Lynette. Willy tells her story straight up, as life is messy. She's as rich and as deep a character as you will ever read. Lynette joins the pantheon of Willy's other memorable characters. I'll talk about the ones I've read. The Flanagan brothers, Frank and Jerry Lee in The Motel Life, Carly of Lean on Pete, and Allison Johnson, probably my personal favorite, of Northline, just to name a few. So let's welcome Willy with a round of applause.
Well, thank you for coming. You're all very brave to come to a reading in the middle of the day when it's not raining. So you can throw things at me if it was a bad idea. I'm really happy to be here. I love libraries. Libraries have always I think have always been my church. So, any town I go to, if you can find the library, it's always like a safe haven. So I'm really grateful to be here. I'm going to talk about my book, The Night Always Comes, just because it's my latest one. And I hope you don't mind. I'll play a couple songs that are, except for this book, actually, all my novels started as songs. And I'll write a song, and usually I write story songs, and usually the story of the song will end when I finish the song, and then sometimes they just start opening up. And with this one, it was the opposite. As I was editing the book, the song started coming. And my band's the Lions are putting out a soundtrack to this one later this year. So I guess I'll just start. This is my most noir. Like, I love noir. Mm-hmm. I always had. I think I was age 20, 21 when I went into a bookstore. I'm from Reno, and I went to a bookstore called Bold Print Books in Reno, and I walked in, and there was a picture of a maniac, like just got out of the mental ward cowboy pointing a gun, and in his chest were these little shelves that had books, Black Lizard books by Jim Thompson and Charles Willeford and David Goodis, these really damaged, psychologically damaged guys writing crime stories, small, like 150-page crime novels. And I bought them just because the covers look cool. There'd be like a really cool looking woman, and there'd be like a guy trying to kill another guy. All these black and white, really arty shots. And so I just bought 5 of them, not knowing what they were, because they were thin. So you're like, oh man, I can read these. And I was obsessed with them. It changed me. For most people, it'd be like The Postman Always Rings Twice by James M. Cain. So with this book, I wanted it to be really fast, and I wanted it to be short and really intense. But I think it started, like, for all of us that live in Oregon or have lived in big cities all over the West, is the idea that they're growing so fast and the prices have gone up so much to live there. So I live in Scappoose, Oregon. But I have an office, I rent this room that overlooks a bar that opens up at 7 a.m. in St. John's, this northern part where the St. John's Bridge goes over. So there's a bar called Slim's, and I have this office that looks down at the outside where guys smoke and drink. And if anything makes you feel good about yourself is when you're there, like, writing a bad story at 9 a.m. and you look out and there's a guy drinking whiskey at 9. You're like, well, at least that ain't me. So you already feel good about yourself. But I remember driving there. I started seeing, maybe 10 years ago, I started seeing cranes everywhere downtown Portland. Crane meaning a new building going up. And I think I counted 15 at one day. And then I noticed, like, in my little place in St. John's, if you walk by, this is when I was just thinking about starting this book. So maybe 4 years ago, half the buildings, the little mom and pop shops in the neighborhood of Lombard were closed. And so if you walk by, you've never been there before, you go, man, this place is really struggling. And then what you realize is they've all sold out. And they're just waiting for permits so they can tear them down and build the condos. And so you start realizing, like, whoa, something's going on. You can't help but, if you hadn't been to Portland in 10 years and you came to Portland now and drove down Division Street, say, or MLK or just like the Burnside Bridge, you'd be blown away about the massive, intense growth. I mean, it's happening in Seattle as well. So I think for me, I started seeing that all these little beat up houses around St. John's that I've always wanted to buy, they're always out of your reach. They're like, oh, it's 175,000 and you have like 100, and then, or you can get a loan for 100, and then it goes to 200. But what I noticed in the last like 7 years, they went from 200 to 300 to 350 to 400, and they're still the same junky, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house that that a lot of guys would spend the money to buy that and then tear it down. And so I started thinking about that. And this is kind of the way I write books. So I started thinking about that a lot. And that was starting to worry me. I just started getting worried. Now, me personally, I had my little office and I got a little place in Scappoose. So I'm okay. But I started getting really worried about all the people that were never going to be able to afford the houses that these houses were built for, which is just like working class families. And then I started seeing all these apartment buildings, and within 5 years, from my roof of my little office, I could count 6 apartment buildings had gone up. But at the same time, there was these camps of tents outside where my office is. So there'd be like, in one area, there was 6 tents, and all the guys were under 40 and drinking vodka and cooking on hibachi. And you had to leave the sidewalk and go out into the street. And I remember, and I was just like, man, this is interesting. And so I used to get a cup of coffee across the street. So I'd walk across the street, and I was getting a cup of coffee, and I came back and I saw this really big guy get out of a tent. He was a really hard drinking guy. He was anywhere from 25 to 35. It's hard to tell because he drank so much. But he was playing with a staff, like a Lord of the Rings staff. And I saw an old lady walk in the middle of the street because she was scared of him. I saw a lady pushing a baby stroller walking in the street because she was scared of him. And then I saw a police car pull right in and wait for the stop sign. And I was waiting for it too, for the stoplight. And then I walk across, and then he just drove on. And I go, well, that's really interesting too. So here you have all this growth, everything's more expensive. And all of a sudden there's these like tent cities popping up everywhere in Portland. I mean, it really got me thinking. And then I got really stuck on the quote of President Trump, which is, the point is you can't be too greedy. And he was talking, but he was talking in terms of business deals. But I thought, wow, that idea of unchecked capitalism and the idea of housing prices going up so much, and then the minimum wage only doubled in 20 years. In Portland, housing prices have gone up 4 times. The minimum wage has only gone up twice. And so the whole thing I was just confused, which I'm mostly confused every day about everything. So I said, well, there's a Safeway in St. John's. I said, well, I'm going to just, like, if I walked into the Safeway in St. John's, I'm going to go down the freezer aisle and just pick one person and say, okay, you're a working class person, you're barely scraping by anyway. And I'm going to double your rent. Or like most guys do, they sell the house and then you have to find some other place to live and see how you deal with it. And so that's kind of how the book, the big ideas of my books always start that way, with these bigger kind of things that I'm kind of grappling with. And so then I thought about like a family. And so then I thought about a family in St. John's that they'd rented the same house for 30 years. And their landlord is going to sell the house, but he wants to sell to them. And it's about an adult woman named Lynette, who's 30, and her mother, and Lynette's brother, who's developmentally disabled. And so they've stuck together as a really dysfunctional unit for a lot of years. Lynette's whole life, she's been kind of a servant to her brother and her mother, and so they're very dysfunctional, and they barely can get by as it is. And then I was just interested in the idea: can these people that have a really deep, dark history jump on the gentrification, jump on the boat and get to keep their house, or they can have to move out of their neighborhood because they don't have enough money. So that's kind of how it started, and I wanted it at breakneck kind of noir speed, which was really fun. The only mistakes I made, a couple big mistakes in this, is I often make huge mistakes in every novel I write, and one of them was my wife was a baker, and so I wanted a bakery in the novel, and Lynette's a baker. So I did that for her, but I go, man, Lynette, I'm going to have her move to Pendleton because I love Pendleton. This is where I get lost in the weeds, and so I go, well, I'll figure out how to get her to Pendleton. She'll buy a bakery, and it'll be all about like how businesses survive in small towns versus this, gentrification thing in Portland. And then of course the book was going pretty good, and then I took that turn, and I spent 1.5 years on it, and she moves out to Pendleton, gets this bakery, and then I stopped. It was so bad which is a bad sign. I quit drinking for 7 months. I started running, and my wife bought me a yoga DVD set, and I pulled those out of the closet trying to figure out why the book, and then I'm mad at myself for every bad thing I've done. I was a house painter for years, and I was like, oh, it was the fumes that finally caught up to me, and I'm brain damaged. Maybe I should go to a doctor and see if there's a medication that can make me smarter so I can figure it out. And then I showed it to my wife, and she goes, this book's really cool, except the whole part about the bakery. It just doesn't work. And I said, but that was the part I wrote for you. She goes, yeah, but it kind of sucks. So I cut it out, and then the book was the book, and it was fine. But I do that. I take, like Bugs Bunny said, I took a wrong turn in Albuquerque, and I can't help it. Take wrong turns. I don't know why. So I guess maybe, and I'm up for talking about anything else. Like if you got any questions or anything, I know I'll read a couple sections from the book, maybe see. I guess like when I talk about the book in these kind of gentrification terms, I guess that was what got me started. But underneath it's about a really dysfunctional mother and daughter and relationship. And all families have difficult times, but I'm always interested in families that have that extra burden of money, like severe money worries on top of everything else. And I've always been interested in the families where somebody abandons them, like the dad. Most of my stories, the dad, I either throw them through windows or they're gone. But I think I was thinking about it the other day because I always feel bad about it. I mean, my dad split, but all the friends I had growing up, maybe out of 5 guys, only one dad was there. And he was a really interesting guy, but he never left his room. He just watched TV all day and read books about like spiritual leaders in India. So he's like really into finding a spiritual center while watching Price is Right, So this is just the start of the book, and this is just Lynette. She's working 2 jobs, and has got to deal with the landlord to buy the house, but she needs her mother to help her get the loan because she has bad credit, and this is just her getting off work. In the carport to the right of the house was a car she'd never seen, a white Toyota Avalon Limited. It had no license plate, only a placard that said Toyota of Portland, and taped to the rear windshield was a white trip permit. Lynette parked on the street, got out, opened the passenger side door for Kenny, and helped him from the car. They walked across the front line, and she stopped and looked inside the Toyota. The seats were black leather, and a clear plastic liner covered the carpeted floor. It was brand new. Inside the house, the curtains were shut and the lights were off. Their mother lay on the couch underneath the electric blanket watching TV. She sat up when they came in. "Come here and kiss your mother," she said to Kenny. He walked slowly toward her, and her hand shook slightly when she lit a cigarette, put it in her mouth, and took hold of his arm. "Sit next to me." She patted the couch with her free hand. "Sit right next to Mommy." Kenny shook his head. "Once in a while, you have to do what somebody else wants, not what you want. So sit." She squeezed his wrist as hard as she could and pulled him down to her. He moaned but sat. Lynette set her purse and keys on the table near the front door. "Whose car is that?" Their mother didn't answer. "Jesus, it's so awful out today." Lynette walked to the living room. "I don't know why you have to have it so dark in here all the time. Do you mind if I turn up the heat, at least for a little bit? I can't seem to get warm today." "Sure," their mother said. Lynette turned the thermostat up to 68. "So whose car is that? It's really nice. Is it Cheryl's? Did yours break down?" Their mother had the cigarette in her left hand and kept her right hand around Kenny's wrist. Her eyes were on the TV and her voice came out so quiet it was barely audible. "It's mine." Lynette laughed. "It's yours? Yeah, I bet. Their mother's voice grew louder, but now it was shaking. I bought it. Lynette looked at her, suddenly worried. What do you mean you bought it? You mean you bought a car today? While I was gone, you didn't go to work like you said you bought a brand new car? Their mother was 57 years old and overweight by 40 pounds. She had dyed brown hair and was dressed in her work clothes, a black suit with a cream-colored blouse. On her feet were thick wool socks. She put the electric blanket over hers and Kenny's legs and moved closer to him and kept her hand tight around his wrist. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd get upset, but I've been looking to get a new car for a long time. You know that. And those guys at Toyota of Portland are nice. They're not slimy at all. So I set up an appointment and they had the one I wanted. I didn't even have to put money down, not a cent. And my payments aren't as bad as you think. They even gave me $1,500 for the Saturn. And as you know, that car was a death trap. The brakes were given out and it didn't steer right. It needed new tires too. The guys at Schwab said I shouldn't even be driving it. How much was it? It was a good deal. But how much? With everything in the better warranty, $39,000. Lynette sat on a wooden chair next to the front door. She covered her face with her hands and her heart began to race. I'm really confused. We're supposed to sign the papers on the house next week. Is it going to screw up the loan? Did you think about the loan? Their mother shook her head. I remember when he wanted us to buy it for $90,000. Now he wants $300,000. He has a lot of nerve. It was 15 years ago when he said 90. That was a long time ago. And he's selling it to us for $280,000. He's taking $20,000 off what it's going to be listed for if he puts it on the market. Plus, we're not going through realtors, so we're saving even more. It's a really good deal, and you know it. I told you just last week the blue house down the street sold for $400,000. Well, that place was a hell of a lot nicer than this one and not on the freeway. I know, but still. Jesus, why would you buy a car today? I've wanted a new one for a long time, their mother said. So finally, I just bought one. That's it? You didn't even think how it'll affect us getting in the house? Their mother didn't answer. Kenny wanted to get up from the couch, but she wouldn't let him. Don't you want to still buy the house? Excellent. Again, their mother remained silent. You know, if we don't buy it, he'll just sell it to somebody else, right? And you know as well as me, we can't afford any other house around here. We'll have to get an apartment, and an apartment's going to cost more than the mortgage. Even a crappy 2-bedroom apartment around here is $1,500, and that's if we're lucky. We only pay $800 now. If we buy this place, we'll have to pay around $1,200 a month. That's still less. That's $300 less a month than any apartment, and we'll finally own something. Their mother knocked the ash from her cigarette into an empty Coke can. He talks an awful lot, but believe me, he won't sell. He's said all this shit before. But this time it's different, and you know what? He already agreed to sell it to us. If we back out now, they'll just put it on the market. He had a realtor come by. She took pictures and everything. You were here when she did the walkthrough. He's tired, and he's old, and he wants to sell. Their mother's hand shook as she picked up a Starbucks coffee cup from the table. Kenny grabbed it for it, but missed. She yelled at him. Man, I'm not reading very good because I haven't read in a long time, and I'm kind of nervous. It's weird how your nerves start going out. All right. All right. I'm going to just keep going, man. All right. I just had a minor memory confidence lapse, but I'm back. I just duct taped my brain back together. Their mother's hand shook as she picked up a Starbucks cup from the coffee table. She grabbed for it, but missed. Don't, she yelled at him. Mr. Claremont's been nice to us, said Lynette. He's trying to help us. Help us. This house is a shithole and he hasn't fixed anything for years. How can that be nice? That's not fair. Well, it's true. Lynette closed her eyes. Her heart was beating so fast she thought she might vomit. We decided not to tell him about anything that was wrong because we were scared he'd start raising the rent like everyone else. So we didn't call him and he never raised the rent. It was a kind of deal, you know that, and it worked. How can he be an asshole for that? Bonnie's rent has nearly doubled in the last 5 years. Even next door, they raised it by $400, and that place is even worse than ours. He hasn't changed our rent in almost 11 years. 11 years. He's not bad. He's just 75 years old. He doesn't care about this place, and he doesn't need the money. He wants us to have the house. That's why he's given us first shot and given us a good deal. And you buy it, the mother said, and let out a rough laugh. Tears suddenly leaked down Lynette's face. You know I can't get a loan, she said. We've gone over this 100 times. I just don't understand why you're doing this right now. I've worked so hard to get us a down payment. You don't have $80,000. I do, and you know it. I showed you my bank account. It's in there. Their mother set down the Starbucks cup, but it's me that's going to be handcuffed to the loan. So that's it. Their mother didn't say anything. We're trying to build something, said Lynette. We're trying to make sure we have a good future. And this is a good deal. I like it here, and Kenny likes it here, and everyone in the neighborhood knows him and looks out for him. Their mother put out her cigarette. I'm 57 years old, and I still buy my clothes at Goodwill. It's a little late for me to care about building the future. And Kenny will be fine anywhere. She kept her eyes on the TV and coughed. You don't know what it's like. Other women my age are going on vacations with their grandkids. They're talking about retirement plans and investments. Me, I haven't taken a vacation since we went to San Francisco, and that was what, over 15 years ago? I'll have to work at Fred Meyer until I drop dead. I'll never get to retire, and that's just a fact. So lately I've been asking myself, why do I have to sacrifice even more than I already had? Why do I have to have a debt hanging over me for the rest of my life? Haven't I given enough? I mean, why can't I have something nice for a change? Just for me, just once. I drove that piece of shit Saturn for 17 years. And day after day, everyone on the road saw me for what I am, a middle-aged, overweight, fatso loser. But it's just a car, Lynette said. You only drive it to work and back. Cars don't mean anything. That's what you think, said their mother. But you don't know anything. Things like that mean something. I don't think they do, not really. So I'll stop there. As you can see, it starts out kind of political, but these are two people that have been together much too long, and for their brother and their arguments. I've always been interested in how some families never talk, and then some families will take like a smoke break or a dinner break in between an argument, and then the second the meal's done or the TV show's over, they hit play again and they go right back at it. And so this is the kind of family that can't stop arguing. These two women can't stop arguing. I'm going to read just one other section that I like, because Lynette, I was really interested in that idea of how when some people use when they don't have control of a situation or they have no power, some people implode and some people explode. And I was just interested in a person that when they feel at their lowest and they feel like they are not in control of their lives, they explode and they're really angry. And I think Lynette has been that person her whole life, where when things get out of control, she erupts. And that's a hard person to be around, and that's a hard person to be. And I was really interested that were, as you were mentioning in another book of mine, I'm always interested in these psychological things. I wrote about a character named Allison Johnson who implodes every time her life falls apart. She blames it. She beats herself up. And Lynette just erupts in anger. So this is just a section where you learn a little bit about Lynette. It's about her falling in love. It began. She saw him that evening and most every evening afterwards for 3 years. Her life had seen so much darkness before meeting Jack, but in meeting him, it was like she was relieved of it, like she had been saved from herself and her past and was suddenly somehow swept away to somewhere beautiful. Her anger vanished to the point where she couldn't remember what it felt like to be full of rage. Her hopelessness disappeared. This is what true love must be, she told herself. It saves you and changes you. It's like living inside a movie where the dirt in you and the scars on you are eradicated. She slept with him after 7 dates. He asked if she'd ever had sex before, and she told him only once when she was in high school. She didn't tell him about her past, about her running away, or about JJ. She didn't tell him about trying to kill herself or the time that she'd spent in a psychiatric hold of a hospital. All the things she had done before Jack, the things she was so ashamed of and damaged by, seemed to fade into nothing just by seeing his face. Some nights she woke up in his apartment with his arms around her, and she was so excited and relieved to be free of herself that she would weep. Within 4 months, she spent 3 nights a week at his apartment and started taking birth control. They had sex nearly every time they saw each other, and for the first time in her life, she had orgasms. When she stayed at his place, he would wake her up with a cup of coffee. He would walk her to work at 6 and pick her up when she got off. He spent all his money on her, and after 5 months, he told her he loved her. He told her he wanted to marry her someday. Jack had a pickup truck, and each week when he got paid, he took her out to eat in a different part of town. They saw movies together. They got drunk together, and they saw bands play. They went roller skating at Oaks Park and ice skating at Lloyd Center. They walked in and out of high-end downtown stores. They spent weekend afternoons strolling through neighborhoods looking at houses they wanted to live in. They went to furniture stores and picked out the furniture that would go in those houses. After 8 months, he drove her to Seaside for the day to meet his parents, and then to Eugene, where his brother Henry was taking classes at the community college to be a mechanic. There was a gentleness to Jack that she could just disappear into. Never once did he blindside her or intentionally try to hurt her. He could get nervous or grumpy, insecure or angry, but when he did, he would try to talk to her about it. He would try to explain himself to her, explain the way he felt. She introduced him to her mother and Kenny, and to Lynette's great relief, Jack liked Kenny. He wanted to spend time with her brother. So they began taking Kenny to lunch at the Sexton on the Columbia River so he could watch the boats pass. They took him to the airport to see planes taking off, to stock car races, to baseball games, to the hot cake house and the horse track. Jack took them camping near Mount Hood. Neither she or Kenny had ever camped before. They had never sat by a campfire. Jack was the first man that Kenny ever really liked. He was the first man that Kenny ever ran to and hugged when he saw him. There were times when Lynette was certain that Jack had been sent by her grandfather to save her life. When they would go to the hot cake house, she would secretly pray to herself and thank her grandfather for remembering her and caring enough about her to bring Jack to her. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she'd say. But after a year it started, the old Lynette would reappear. In those moments, her sadness and hopelessness and anger would rush past her like a speeding car. It nearly broke her when it first happened because she realized she hadn't rid herself of who she'd been. She hadn't rid herself of herself. And once she knew that, it became a fog that chased her, a fog that would never completely disappear. At first, she was able to keep it under control because it only came out when she was tired, sick, or too drunk. Over time, though, it took more and more work. She began having to force herself to act happy. She told Jack none of this because she was certain if he knew how much she struggled and what she was really like, he would leave her. It came out first in Seaside. So that's just a little section about who Lynette is, who Lynette is, and getting involved with her is really tricky. The thing I like about her so much is she might not be the smartest person in the room, but and she's not the smartest person in the novel, but she's the toughest, and no one thinks she's tough. So she's really cool in that regard. I wrote this one song about her. I don't sing a lot of songs anymore because I was in this band for 23 years where I sang a ton of I sang them all, and but my dream was never to do that, and so. As you get older, you start realizing you better, if you want to change your life, you better get going on it. And so I'm in a band called The Delines where I just write songs for this really cool woman singer. And I write these sad ballads, and she's brave and crazy enough to sing them. So I'm going to try one of them. But I wrote this for Lynette. It's that idea when you realize the city you live in might haunt you to the point where you can't live there anymore. So apologize, this is not in my key very good. The night now haunts me in places that never used to haunt me. Neighborhoods, houses, and even the bridge lights racing by. Every street I pass now reminds me, like a punch I never see coming, what I've done and what's been done to me. Every time I look back, it's gated. Won't ever let me be. If I glance too long, it keeps me up all night. It puts the hurt into me. Don't think much of me, but I've been struggling. Don't think less of me, but I just been getting by. Don't think less of me, but I've been struggling. Don't think less of me, 'cause I've just been getting by. That's just a little version of that song. So the last, my book before was called Don't Skip Out on Me. And I love the guy in that book so much. Well, I wrote a whole record about him, but the song started is a song maybe a year and a half before I actually started the book. And the song was called Don't Skip Out on Me. And it was a title that none of my publishers liked the title. But the one cool thing about most people is if you say, okay, then what's a better title? And then everybody's like, shit, I don't know. And then so you just kind of wait around and you go, look, I don't have much of an ego really at all. So if somebody gives me something better, I'll take it, you know. And so finally they just gave up and they're like, okay, let's just do called Don't Skip Out on Me. So so this is the song that kind of inspired the book. And I always want my books to feel like they're dipped in a certain like the feel of a song. You know, when a song really moves you, there's a feeling that you get, like a melancholy feeling if it's a sad ballad, and that's kind of what I write. So I always want my novels to feel like songs, if that makes any sense. And so I think this one's close to the Horse and the Don't Skip Out on Me. Don't skip out without taking me. Don't skip out. Don't skip out on me. But I know you think that I'm just a liability, but I can carry my weight. Just don't skip out on me. The bus from Tonopah, it can take my money too. And in California, she's always promised me a room. She still run out on me while I'm sleeping. My books ain't right and my health's been failing. It was your fault as much as mine. We both know that's true. We traveled some hard miles. That's gotta mean something. I keep my eyes open. It's getting harder and harder. Don't skip out without taking me. Don't skip out. I don't skip out on me. Thank you for clapping. If you can see, probably you can hear why I probably was smart to get in a band with a woman singer. Do you have any questions or anything? Is there any questions? I like answers. Yeah.
Is there going to be a book in a bakery?
No, I gave up on that. I gave it. Yeah, it about like I said. Unless I want to pull out the yoga DVDs again, and you know, try to be a better version of myself. I'll probably. I tried my best on that, so I'm done. I'm done. But I wanted it. You know, I tried. Yeah.
Are your characters based on people you've met, or bits and pieces from lots of people?
Both. You know, it depends. I usually start with bigger like ideas. Like I was really a chronic handicapper. Like I love betting on horses. I really liked it, and then I started falling in love with the horses, and I started falling in love with jockeys. There was some really cool jockeys at Portland Meadows, and I loved them. And then you start, and I'm slow to the game, so it took me years before I realized how hurt all the jockeys were getting, and low level horse racing is really rough. So I broke up with horse racing, and so I wrote Lean on Pete because I was trying to break up with horse racing. So in that regard, like I think I kind of start there, but I've never written about what. I'll put it this way: if I'm mad at somebody or want to throw somebody under a bus, I write fiction, so I can make if it's if it's a kid I'm mad at, I can make him an old woman. If it's my dad I'm mad at, I can make him a high school girl. So I can beat up anybody, and no one sees it in themselves, anyway.
What about musicians?
My new book. I just finished a book, and it's the first one I ever written about musicians. It's the life of a casino musician in Reno. So obviously very uplifting. But I guess that'll come out next year sometime. So yeah, it was my first one. That's the other thing. I wanted to write one about a music. I wanted to write one novel about music, and then the three I wanted to write about nurses. I always loved nurses, and so I wanted to write one about nurses. So I picked those kind of bigger themes, I guess. Yeah, it's kind of how I roll.
Yeah, Willie, my favorite character in all the books is Earl. Used cars.
Oh yeah.
So, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, me too, man. I wrote another one of my failed novels. Is I wrote a novel about. So in my novel, In Motel Life, the kind of the coolest guy in the book is this old kind of grizzled used car salesman who owns Hurley's used car lot in Reno. And it kind of started as my mom's boyfriend sold $100 cars in Reno for a long time. And he'd sit at this bar called the Elbow Room. And then across the street was the used car lot. And he'd just sit in there and wait for somebody to walk on the lot, and then he'd run across the street. And you know, I've had my tumultuous love affairs with booze. So you know, when I was 30 and he told me that story, I was like, damn, that sounds like the greatest job of all time. And so I wrote a novel about that guy, and then he showed up in the and it was a horrible novel, but really fun to write. But I loved him. I love that idea. I had a buddy whose dad was a used car salesman, and I just love the idea. Like Tom Waits says, you know, you can drive a different car every day, depending on the way you feel. And I really like that idea. And it, you know, I always did I always worked in warehouses or as a house painter, and the idea of like selling cars and watching TV all day just seemed like heaven. And then you could go home in like in a Cadillac, even if it's, you know, a shitty Cadillac at least. So, oh, thanks. Yeah, he was like he was my dream father.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You ever see you know the actor Harry Dean Stanton is?
Mhm.
So I always thought of him as my my mom that must be my dad. So I was influenced. I was under the spell of Harry Dean Stanton with that one. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad you like him. I like that guy too. I used to dress like him. I used to have a name tag that said Earl Hurley, and I, you know, when I was crazier than I am now, I'd walk around like I just got off the used car lot, but I was Earl Hurley. But you know, I'm crazy enough to live my life writing weird stories, so it makes sense that I would walk around dressed like him, I guess.
It's not a question, but there's a really nice comment from a Portland high school teacher.
Oh, I forgot to
who says that her kids really love to read you. That you are one of the authors that they want to read.
Oh,
so,
that makes me
wow.
That's nice. Yeah. I don't know if that's a good sign for the youth of tomorrow, but hopefully it is somehow. Any others?
Is the new band touring locally?
No, man. We don't do very good in the U.S. I don't know why, but we do better in Europe, so we just tour there.
Well, you'll do great in Manzanita.
Oh yeah. We're making a new record this year.
Good.
We toured since COVID. Last year was our first touring year again, and we did really well. I mean, and then this year we're going to Australia and the spring and then in Europe in the fall, and then we'll wait till the new record comes out. But yeah, we're doing okay for a ballad lounge band.
Why is it that so many small local bands do better in Europe than they do in the United States? Is there too much competition from the big guys? Or?
I have no idea. You know, for us is I was in this band Willy Vlautin for 20 years, and we toured for a while. We toured semi-hard in the States. I've never liked touring a lot because I like writing stories, and I hate being broke too. So I like it. But we just got lucky. We went to a party where this guy was moving back to Europe, and he said, "Give me a box of CDs, and I'll get you guys." He was a music guy, like a business guy, because I'll get you guys a tour and all that stuff over there. And you're like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, because you hear a lot of guys make you promises, especially low-level bands, and they make you a lot of promises, or they get drunk one night and they say, like, I'm going to dedicate my life to making sure you do all right. And you're like, really? Okay. So this guy was the same thing. I gave him a box of CDs, and you're just like, well, man, that's one less box under my bed, CDs. And then he called us. This was 2000. He called us or emailed me and just said, you guys all have passports, right? And we literally had a 3-day party because we were all going to get our passports, and we were in our early 30s. It wasn't like one guy had a passport, the other guys didn't. Like, we'd never even thought of going anywhere. So we had like this huge party just to get our pictures taken. So like when you see the passport picture of all of us, we just look like really bloated, and it's like we'd been partying for 3 days. And then he said, "Yeah, we got a tour. I got a tour." And you're like, "Really?" And we went over there. We started out with just me and one other guy, and we did okay. And it was really, it's obviously changed my life. It was really lucky. I have no idea why they liked us or why we did okay at in our little world of what we do. We're doing okay. And the first tour, I was with the guitar player, Dan Eccles. He's a really great dude. And I used to take him aside and I go, "Do you think this is like candid camera? Like where they're gonna eventually make fun of us? Because I have no idea why people are clapping, but they're actually clapping, and it makes no sense to me. Because like they're playing like, Kansas City, and there's like 10 people there, and you do that for like 6 years, and then all of a sudden you go to some other country and there's more people, and none of it made sense. But I was, obviously I was very glad and lucky. So that was a long-winded way of saying I have no idea about any of it. I'm just grateful that my band got a little, our little boat got to be a boat for a while. Yeah.
So a writer has an intimacy with their book. What's it like when they make it into a movie?
And you just can't take it. Yeah, I mean, there's that famous saying, like, just like take the money and run. That's one idea. The other idea is to jump in bed and try to get your vision across.
What did you do?
Well, I realized early, I had some early stuff with my first book, Motel Life. I had a kind of a hoity-toity guy buy it. And he was like, we'll go to Mexico, you and me, and we'll write the screenplay. And I'm like, Jesus, I don't know anything about screenplays, but you're a lot smarter than me, and this sounds great. So I signed with him, and then I never heard from him again. And then I call him up. I go, "Hey man, what about you and me, Mexico? We're gonna hang out in Mexico City, and you're gonna teach me all about writing screenplays." And he's like, "Oh yeah, let me get back to you on that." And so then his manager calls me and just says, "We'll give you his money to write a screenplay." So I just go, okay. And so I read, for 8 months, I'm reading screenplays all day long and writing this screenplay. And I give it to those guys, and I'd never heard from them again. And then I'd call them up, and they'd go, "Oh yeah, we really like it." And I go, "Well, what does that mean?" Like, and they go, "We'll get back to you. We'll get back to you." And then a year passes, and I ran into the guy at this book kind of thing, and I go, "So man, you never." Like, and I don't care, but I was just like, well, "What happened to that screenplay I sent you?" He's like, "Didn't you get my notes?" And I go, "No, man." He goes, "Do you check your email?" And I go, Yeah, I check my email. And he goes, "I'll send it to you tonight." And then I haven't heard from him since. So I learned by that I'd wasted a year. And then these other guys bought the Motel Life, and we're really into it. And I just said, well, have fun. And because I'm not smart enough, I'm not thick-skinned enough, and they don't care about what I say. So in general, I think I just kind of put my head in the sand and be grateful. Like I paid off my house. I got some free dinners. People are nice to you. The people being nice to you is great. So I don't have anything to do with it. I did, make stinks about certain stuff and on both things, and no one ever listens to you. They don't really want the writer there. Mm-hmm. And I begged on a couple of things on both of those things, and both times, and there was kind of small things, and they were both like, nah. So, but they're both good experiences, and working with Andrew Haig in Lean on Pete, the director, that guy's as cool as a person gets. And so I was just grateful that he was gonna try hard on it. I mean, those guys, movie people, the directors, I mean, they have a lot to lose. I have nothing to lose, really. I'll get bummed out if it's not good or whatever. But, no one's going to give them millions of dollars again if it's horrible. So they have a lot riding on it. So I figured that they would try their best. And in both cases, I think they really tried their best. So I stay out of it, really. I run the other way. I take the money and run, I guess. I got it. But thank God there's a little money. Yeah.
Any particular influences in your journey to becoming a writer?
I mean, growing up, I'm, as you can tell, I'm not like I'm not the intellectual giant. I think for me, the guy that made me feel comfortable, that there's two. Steinbeck, I was in love with Steinbeck growing up because I just where I went to school, he was really popular there during that 10 years or whatever. And so I read through middle school and high school. I read most of his was taught most of his major books. And so, I always loved music, but I had his picture next to, like, I was really in this band called The Clash and The Jam and these kind of more punk rock, but kind of political bands. And then I had Steinbeck right next to him. So I really liked him, but I thought, he's he's a genius. And then when I was 20, I read Raymond Carver, and who's from this general area. And then, he writes about failed men that are kind of carried by women. And I was like, holy shit, I know those stories. Because my mom ran our show, and men were not always the greatest. And at the time I was reading him, I was living in my girlfriend's garage of her parents' house, and I didn't have a job. So I was like in that world, totally broke and a kind of a loser. And driving an 82 Honda Civic that you had to push start once in a while. And so he devastated me. But I was like, oh man, I didn't know you were allowed to write stories about just losers that weren't like James Bond losers, or even Charles Bukowski, who's kind of a, drinking legend, has this wild life. But Carver, a lot of the stuff I got out of Carver was, you're just kind of a bum. Your wife's like managing Denny's all day, and you're pulling your hair out, and then you're mean to her, and you're like, I didn't know you could write those. So he early on was an influence, and Larry Brown, the Southern working class writer, I really liked, and then Robert Laxalt, the Nevada writer. So yeah, I have a ton. I was just talking about Claire Keegan. Right now, I'm really in love with her books. Lucia Berlin, I love her. Manual for Cleaning Women. That's probably that's probably my favorite book. So I read a lot. I've always loved it. But early influence is probably Steinbeck. He was I have his books by my bed and his picture by my bed just to remind me to try hard. Yeah. I guess that's it.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
So Willie's going to sign books if you bought some already and you brought them. And we have books back there, and I think Willie brought some, and we'll put them out.
Yeah, if you run out of books there, I got a few in here.
And they came from Can Be Book Store, book company.
Yeah, I remember Val. I don't know if you guys,
Yeah.
Man, I had a crush on Val.
Yeah.
Oh, she had a crush on you.
Really? I know.
I wanted to say that when I went to come over, the young woman said, if there's not a seat, you'll have to sit on Willie's lap. And I said, and I'm going to tell Valerie in heaven or hell that I got to sit on Willie's lap. She will be so jealous.
No,